My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 33, and yesterday my father suspended me in front of our entire board for undermining my sister. He thought I'd walk out embarrassed, apologize, fall back in line like I always did. What he didn't know was that I'd already built the one thing he never expected proof. Years of timelines. Over time, logs, broken promises, every lie Brianna sold to clients, and something else he definitely didn't know. The USB my mother left behind before she died, the one that confirmed I was never imagining, the favoritism that shaped my entire life. They thought suspending me would control me. They had no idea what it would unleash. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you. I wish I could say the story gets easier from here, but it doesn't. What happened after that meeting unraveled everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and love. I didn't walk into Hayes Tech blind. The moment I stepped into that glass building at 26, I carried decades of history with me, quiet cuts, uneven shadows, moments that looked ordinary from the outside, but shaped everything inside me. If you've ever grown up in a house where love was measured unevenly, you know exactly what I mean. I was 8 the first time I realized my father's gaze didn't land on me the way it landed on Brianna. It was a humid June afternoon, the kind where the air feels sticky and chalk dust clings to your palms. I rushed home, waving my report card, the big red A+ on my math exam, still fresh enough that the markers smelled sharp and chemical. Mom was chopping onions, the kitchen smelling like butter and fresh herbs, sunlight pooling across the counter. She saw my grin and clapped her flour-dusted hands together. "Lauren, sweetheart, that's amazing." Her voice was warm honey, the kind that seeped into your bones. She kissed my forehead, then turned to call for Dad. I stood straighter, chest puffed like a little soldier waiting for his medal. Dad walked in, tie loose and sweat darkening his collar after a long day. I handed him the paper, practically vibrating. He glanced at it, a 3-second scan, barely a beat. "Good job, kiddo," he muttered. Then without pause, he spotted Brianna behind me, wearing her glittery costume for the school play, and his whole face lit up. "Now look at you, my little star." He scooped her up, spinning her while she giggled. My report card slipped from his fingers and landed on the tile with a soft slap I never forgot. I picked it up quietly while Brianna twirled in his arms. I didn't understand it then. I just knew the warmth that filled my chest a moment before had drained out, replaced by something hollow and sharp. Looking back, I didn't know it then, but that tiny moment would matter later. The pattern only deepened as we grew. Middle school became a parade of uneven attention. I won a regional science fair, something I had spent months building, soldering tiny circuits until my fingers smelled like metal. Dad nodded when I showed him the ribbon, but dismissed it with a casual, "Science stuff always came easy to you?" A week later, Brianna joined cheerleading, and he bought her a brand new pair of sneakers, driving an hour to get the exact brand the squad captain recommended. Then came the night everything crystallized. I was 17 when the MIT envelope arrived. The big one. The kind every ambitious kid hopes to see. I remember the metallic thud as it hit the mailbox, the December air cold enough to sting. I ripped it open on the porch, breath-fogging, heart pounding like a drum inside a metal room. "Congratulations!" The words shimmered on the page. I cried. Mom cried harder. She hugged me so tightly her sweater smelled like lavender detergent and winter air. We planned a celebratory dinner, just the 4 of us. Mom made roast chicken, the kind that filled the house with warmth and garlic and lemon. I set the table with real plates, not the scratched everyday ones. Dad sat down, looked at my acceptance letter, nodded once. "I knew you'd get in," he said, "just that. No smile, no hug, no spark." Then Brianna stood up from her seat, held out her hand, and a diamond ring glinted under the chandelier. "I'm engaged," Dad's chair scraped loudly as he bolted up, practically shouting with joy. He hugged her, kissed her forehead, toasted her with Mom's good wine, and spent the rest of the night asking about wedding plans. My acceptance letter lay on the table next to the breadbasket, curling at the edges from the steam. I never forgot that either. Mom noticed, of course. She always noticed the small tremors no one else cared about. After dinner, she sat beside me on the porch steps. The evening smelled like snow and pine and distant chimney smoke. "You did something extraordinary today," she whispered. "I know." But it didn't matter. Her eyes softened, not pity, but understanding. She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It mattered to me. I swallowed everything else, the bitterness, the burn in my throat, and tucked it somewhere deep. But it carved a place inside me that never fully healed. Even now, sometimes I wonder if she knew then how far that crack would spread. When Mom died 7 years ago, 3 months after I joined Hayes Tech, something shifted in the house. If she had been the thin bridge between Dad's pride and my quiet ache, then losing her snapped the last thread holding that balance. After the funeral, the house smelled like lilies and stale grief. Dad threw himself into work, Brianna into social appearances, and I tried to survive the silence. I found out much later that Mom had left diaries, pages documenting every slight, every moment she saw the favoritism tilt too hard toward Brianna. But I didn't know about any of that yet. At work, I kept my head down, drowning myself in code product specs and late-night deployments. Hayes Tech became the one place I felt I could earn something until even that foundation started to crack. And I didn't know it then, but those cracks were already forming long before the Helix deal. Hayes Tech in those early years felt like a sanctuary I built with my own hands. My office wasn't big, but the view of downtown made everything glow at night. It smelled like stale coffee dry erase markers and whatever takeout my team and I survived on during late releases. I taped my MIT acceptance letter behind the door, not for bragging rights, but as a reminder that I once earned something purely on my own. Back then, development was a scrappy team of 10. Ethan wasn't even my deputy yet, just a shy but brilliant engineer who scribbled ideas on sticky notes and left them on my desk like secret messages. Jenna and Marco were the kind to fight over keyboard shortcuts, but always show up with donuts after all-nighters. They became my people long before I realized I needed them. But even in those early days, Brianna floated through the office like she owned the air. She'd breeze into meetings, late smelling like expensive perfume and iced vanilla lattes, dropping half-understood buzzwords she heard at conferences. Dad thought she was a natural salesperson. I thought she was a natural hazard. She'd pitch deadlines that ignored time, reality, physics, whatever she believed would make a client sign fastest. Once she promised a full-feature analytics dashboard in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The kind of project that takes at least 10, even with a miracle and a Red Bull of 4 drip. I remember standing in Dad's office, my laptop under my arm, my pulse hammering in my throat. Rain hammered the windows behind him like an angry drummer. I laid out the real timeline model's benchmark staffing requirements. He skimmed, sighed, and said, "Lauren, you have to learn to meet the market where it is." I kept my voice level. The market can't bend time. He leaned back. "Brianna knows what clients need emotionally. You need to balance that. Emotion doesn't rewrite code," I wanted to say. But I swallowed it. Like always, we delivered that project in 14 grueling weeks, after my team worked nights and weekends, after I cut my own bonus to patch the budget, after Ethan nearly burned out. Brianna took credit. Dad congratulated her in front of the entire company. My team, exhausted, just looked at me with quiet gratitude. I felt like a ghost, watching my own work vanish into someone else's spotlight. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first thread in the rope that would eventually snap. The favoritism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle enough to make me doubt myself. Like the time we hosted a Christmas dinner at Dad's house. The place smelled like cinnamon pine candles and roasted ham. Dad handed Brianna a new MacBook to help her manage her client accounts. For me, a scented journal from Target. "You like writing?" he said with a shrug. I didn't cry, but the heat behind my eyes stayed for days. Or the Thanksgiving where Brianna arrived late, wearing a sparkly dress, and Dad stood up to hug her, serving her a plate before anyone else. I brought mashed potatoes nobody touched because everyone was too busy praising Brianna's store-bought pie. Little things, sharp things, things you pretend to ignore until you feel yourself bleeding from places no one can see. And then came Helix Dynamics, our biggest potential contract in a decade. Brianna pitched them a customized platform in 4 weeks. 4. If the previous impossible deadlines had been red flags, this was a flaming billboard screaming disaster ahead. The morning after she made that promise, she stormed into my office, slamming the glass door so hard the frames rattled. "You made me look incompetent," she snapped. I blinked. "By sending a realistic timeline, you promised a software rebuild in a month." Her eyes narrowed into knives. "You don't get to undermine me. I landed them, not you." "You lied to them, Brianna. Don't play innocent with me," she hissed. "Just fix it. That's your job, isn't it?" "My job." "Right. Clean up her mess. Absorb the impact. Carry the consequences." I sent the email anyway, the one that laid out the 12-week realistic timeline. The one that copied Dad because transparency mattered. The one that deep down I knew would start a war. That night after I shut my laptop, I sat in my apartment staring at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked older than 33, tired, bracing. I didn't know it then, but the Helix email was the first domino. 3 days later, the boardroom lights were cold, Brianna's smirk was sharp, and Richard Hayes delivered his verdict, like a judge who had already written the sentence long before the trial began. Suspended. 2 weeks. Without pay. Until I apologized. But the part they didn't see, the part even I didn't fully understand yet, was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to swallow it. The morning after the board meeting, the office felt different, quieter, tighter, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the next blow. My badge still worked, but the receptionist's smile faltered when she saw me. Not pity, not judgment. Just that stunned, careful look people give someone standing too close to a fire. I walked to development, footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. Ethan spotted me first. His chair rolled back, almost tipping. "Lauren, what the hell happened? Brianna's telling everyone you're suspended." I kept my voice calm, steady. "It's true." Jenna stood up too fast, knocking over her water bottle. "Suspended for what?" "Doing your job," Marco muttered. This place is insane under his breath. The team crowded around me, their faces a mix of shock, anger, and something else, fear. Because if I could be taken down for telling the truth, what did that mean for the rest of them? I held up a hand. "I'll be fine. Focus on the sprint. Ethan, you take point." Ethan's jaw tensed. "You shouldn't have to leave for this." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't agree, but because agreeing would feel like bleeding in public. While I packed my office, the building hummed with whispers. I could feel them behind the glass walls. Heads leaning together, fingers tapping Slack messages, side glances through half-open doors, scripted corporate empathy without the courage to act. My phone buzzed nonstop. "Brianna, you made this worse than it needed to be." "Brianna, again, if you apologize today, Dad might reconsider." "A third ignoring us isn't going to help your case. My case." As if I were a defendant in a crime she invented. Then Alan, the company's lawyer, called. "Lauren, I need to talk to you privately. There's nothing to talk about." His voice tightened. "The Helix situation is escalating. They want clarification on the timeline discrepancy." I paused, a cold ripple sliding through me. They should have had that yesterday. "That's exactly the problem. Brianna told them your email was a mistake. She said you misunderstood the scope." A bitter laugh escaped. "Of course she did. Look," he said, lowering his voice. "This could expose the company legally. We need to align the narrative before I'm not aligning a lie, Alan." Silence. He exhaled, defeated. "Richard is furious. He thinks you embarrassed the company. I sent the truth. Sometimes the truth is inconvenient." There it was. The heartbeat of Hayes Tech under my father's rule. Optics over reality. Loyalty over accuracy. Family over fairness, but only when that family member was Brianna. I hung up without responding. As I wrapped my framed degrees in bubble wrap, I thought of all the nights I'd stayed late coding, planning roadmaps, mentoring junior engineers, the nights when the city lights blurred through my office window, and I'd really believed, that hard work could outweigh favoritism. Another buzz, this time Diane. "Your father called me," she said without hello. "He's convinced you're having a breakdown." Heat flared in my chest. A breakdown because I sent a responsible email? Because you embarrassed Brianna? Her tone sharpened. Because you didn't fall in line. I sat down on the edge of my empty desk. The vinyl edge dug into my palms. "I'm done falling in line." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I think It's time you saw something. My breath hitched. Mom's journals and the USB she left. There's more than I thought. She hesitated. Some of it might hurt, but I think you need the truth. The truth already hurts. No, she said quietly. You've only had the surface. Your mother saw everything. A tightness formed in my throat. For a moment, the office blurred. I blinked hard, steadying myself. I'll come by tonight, I whispered, because even now, even after everything, part of me still wondered if I had imagined it all. If maybe I was too sensitive, too rigid, too unforgiving. The child who misread every gesture. The daughter who wanted too much. That doubt, small, cruel familiar, had followed me my entire life. It was Brianna's greatest weapon, Dad's too. In Diane's words, Mom saw everything cut straight through that doubt like a blade. By late afternoon, I'd cleared out everything but one last box. Photos of my team, the world's okayest boss mug they'd given me, scribbled sticky notes from Ethan. The small things, human things that made the job more than a paycheck. As I lifted the box, I caught my reflection in the office window. Hair pulled back in its usual low twist, navy blouse, minimal makeup, smartwatch flashing the time. I looked steady, controlled. But underneath, something had shifted, quiet, seismic, irreversible. On my way out, I passed the conference room where it had all happened. The chairs were still pushed back unevenly from yesterday's meeting. The scent of stale coffee and nervous sweat still clung to the air. A small piece of memory stuck there. Dad's voice like a gavel, Brianna's triumph, curling at the edges. Suspended until you apologize. But the more I replayed it, the less it felt like punishment, and the more it felt like permission. 2 floors down by the elevators, I heard murmurs. That's her. God, I can't believe they did that. Brianna must have loved it. I kept walking. If I stopped, if I acknowledged any of it, the fragile dam inside me might crack. The elevator dings echoed like final verdicts. Behind me, the company I had built from the inside out hummed on without me, unsteady, misled. But marching forward all the same. They didn't know it yet. But everything was about to collapse. When I left the building that day, the sky was the kind of dull gray that makes everything look washed out. Portland drizzle misted the sidewalks, coating my hair and sleeves as I walked to my car. Each raindrop felt like a metronome tapping an uneven rhythm against the windshield as I sat inside, box on my lap, breath fogging the glass. I should have driven home. Instead, I sat there staring at the company's tall blue logo until my vision blurred. Brianna had told the board I undermined her authority. Dad repeated it as if it were scripture. But the truth was simpler. I told the truth. And in our family, the truth was always an act of rebellion. I didn't know then that the next 24 hours would turn everything upside down. At Diane's house that evening, the air smelled like old books, chamomile tea, and the faint sandalwood perfume my mother used to wear. Diane's living room was warm, filled with mismatched cushions, plants in 2 small pots, and soft lamps that made the place feel like a hug you didn't know you needed. She handed me a shoebox. Inside journals. My mother's handwriting, loopy, soft, familiar, curled across the covers, and underneath them, wrapped in a pale blue scarf, was a USB drive. She left this with me, Diane whispered, said to keep it safe, said someday you might need it. My throat tightened. Did Dad know she didn't trust him with it? I inhaled sharply, the room tilting for a moment. Lauren, Diane said, sitting beside me. Your mom saw everything. She wrote things down because she didn't want you growing up believing your pain was imaginary. I swallowed hard. What's on the USB? Diane hesitated before answering. 2 letters, one for your father and one for you. My pulse spiked. The room felt suddenly too small, the air thick enough to choke on. You don't have to read them tonight, Diane added gently, but I already knew I would. Because something inside me was splintering, and I needed truth like oxygen. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the couch, with only the glow of my laptop and the sound of rain against the windows. My hands trembled as I opened the first journal. Entry after entry. Richard dismissed Lauren's win again today. Brianna failed another client task. Richard excused it. Lauren looks so tired. She tries so hard. I don't know how to help her. I need to talk to Richard tomorrow. This is getting worse. But the last entry ended mid-sentence. A half-written thought. My mother died 3 days later. I didn't make it through all the journals that night. I couldn't. My eyes burned. My chest twisted and something inside me cracked open, the kind of crack you don't repair, you just learn to live around. Around midnight, I opened the USB. Her letter to me began with my name. Lauren, if you're reading this, then you must be facing a choice I always feared might come for you. I didn't finish the sentence before I burst into tears, messy, shaking, breathless sobs that scraped my throat raw. Because she knew. She always knew. And she had tried to protect me in the only way she could, by leaving me proof that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't too sensitive, that I wasn't wrong. By the time dawn crept in, pale and watery, something had settled inside me. A stillness, a clarity. I wasn't going back, not to apologize, not to explain, not to negotiate. The next morning, the office was buzzing like an anthill someone had kicked. People clustered in hallways, whispering, doors half open, eyes sharp. The tension was so thick you could feel it on your skin. I walked toward my old office to pick up the last set of files, hard HR paperwork, final employee forms, the laptop return. But the door was open, and Brianna was sitting at my desk, rifling through drawers I had already emptied. She looked up startled, then angry, then victorious in the span of 3 seconds. "You can't barge in here," she snapped. "It's still my office," I said calmly. "Not for long." I didn't respond. Silence unnerved her more than any words. She stepped closer. Arms crossed her perfume, strong enough to sting. "You caused chaos. You know that Helix is demanding answers. Dad's furious. He should be. Don't play righteous with me. You always think you're some martyr for honesty." I tilted my head slightly. "You lied to a major client," she smirked. "And you sent an email acting like you're the hero who saves the company." "No," I said softly. "I sent an email that told the truth. You just didn't expect anyone to see it." Her expression flickered. Fear, then rage, then something uglier. "You're jealous," she said. "You always have been. Dad chose me for a reason." "Yes," I whispered. "He did. And that reason had nothing to do with competence." Her face flushed. "You think you're better than me. I know I work harder than you." She inhaled sharply, about to lash back, but then footsteps thundered down the hallway. Richard, Alan. A board member trailing behind them. "Lauren, Dad," barked my office. "Now." Except we didn't go to his office. We went to the boardroom again, the stage of my sentencing, the ground of my breaking. But this time I wasn't walking in as the one on trial. My resignation letter in my hand felt like a loaded weapon. Inside, the tension was a living thing. Alan looked pale. Dad looked exhausted. Brianna stood near the door, arms tight across her chest. "Sit," Dad ordered. I didn't. "I'm here to finalize my departure," I said. He blinked. "Departure." I placed the letter on the table, effective immediately. "You think you can just walk away?" His voice rose. "I already have." His face reddened, and for a moment I saw at the moment he realized he no longer had control. Everything that followed, the raised voices, the legal panic, the shift of power, belonged to the climax. But the escalation, the true breaking point, it was simple. I wasn't theirs anymore. And Hayes Tech had no idea how close it was to burning. The hallway outside the boardroom felt colder than usual, as if the air itself sensed what was coming. My heels clicked against the tiles, slow, deliberate, almost unnervingly calm. I could feel eyes on me. From half-open office doors, the whispers paused as I passed. People held their breath the way you do before a storm hits. Inside the boardroom, lights were too bright, reflecting off the polished mahogany table like interrogation lamps. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed a gray Portland morning fog curling around the skyline. My resignation letter felt heavy in my hand, edges warm from the tightness of my grip. Richard stood at the head of the table, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff under his tailored suit. He didn't look like a CEO today. He looked like a man watching his world tilt in real time. Beside him, Brianna hovered near the wall, arms folded, face pale, no lipstick confidence, now just raw panic pulsing under the surface. Alan, the company lawyer, sat near the end laptop open, fingers shaking slightly as he typed. His tie was crooked and a thin sheen of stress glistened across his forehead. Gregory Shaw, the one board member who tried to speak up yesterday, sat silently with a tight, troubled expression. Lauren, my father said, voice sharp, explain yourself. I set the resignation letter in the center of the table. The paper made a crisp sound that echoed far louder than it should have. I'm leaving the company, I said. Effective immediately. Richard stared at the letter as if it were a foreign object. You think you can walk away after the damage you've caused? I met his eyes without flinching. I didn't cause the damage. I prevented worse. Brianna laughed too loud, too tight. Oh, please. You sent that email to make me look incompetent. You did that yourself, I said quietly. Her mouth snapped shut. Alan cleared his throat, voice low. Richard, we need to discuss the documents Miss Hayes attached yesterday. Dad glared at him. The documents she sent were unauthorized. Actually, Alan said, shifting uneasily, they fell under permissible internal reporting, and the portion she sent to Helix contained no proprietary information, only timeline summaries. Nothing violates her contract. The room went still. Richard turned slowly toward him. What did you just say Alan swallowed? Legally, she did nothing wrong. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I broke it by sliding another folder across the table. I'm exercising my contractual rights. Section 7, Section 12, and Section 19. Richard's face drained of color. Those clauses were meant to protect you in case leadership took disciplinary action without cause. I finished. You suspended me for doing my job. That suspension was justified. He snapped. Then why I said tilting my head, did Helix respond this morning asking why they were promised non-existent features? Richard stiffened. Brianna froze. Alan's hands hovered uselessly above his keyboard. I pulled out my phone and tapped a message open. Helix sent this at 6:42 a.m. They want an emergency meeting with leadership. They've copied their legal department. They referenced Brianna's promises and the timeline I provided. Light flickered across their faces, shock, dread, denial. Helix expects answers, I continued, and documentation, which I provided months of it. Richard exhaled sharply, a sound between disbelief and anger. You blindsided us. No, I said. You ignored every warning I gave you. His voice rose. You're tearing this family apart. I stepped closer to the table's edge, pressing into my hip. No, that happened long before today. For a moment, I saw something in his expression, not anger, not authority, but something almost childlike, a flicker of fear. Brianna recovered first. This is extortion, she spat. You're holding the company hostage for a payout. I looked at her slowly, letting the silence cut sharper than any retort. Brianna, what I'm asking for is a severance package outlined in a contract you never bothered to read. Her eyes widened. Dad, she's twisting this. I turned back to him. 4 years ago, when we restructured, I drafted those clauses. You signed off on them because you trusted me. Ironic, isn't it? The protections you gave me are the same ones freeing me now. Richard's hands trembled against the table. Lauren, we can fix this. Take a week off. Come back. We'll move forward. There is no moving forward, I whispered. Please. He pressed, voice cracking. You're my daughter. Exactly, I said. And you only remember that when it benefits you. The room felt like it was shrinking, every breath, every trembling inhale, every rustling sleeve amplified. Outside, the window's fog crept down the glass like ghostly fingers. Alan finally spoke, voice the softest in the room. Richard, fighting her legally would be costly, and based on the documentation, we would likely lose. For the first time, Brianna looked genuinely afraid. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice trembling. You can't leave. You can't. I already did. She stepped forward, desperation replacing arrogance. You want attention? Fine. You win. Happy now? My laugh was soft, almost pitying. This was never about attention. It was about respect, something you never understood. Richard slammed his palm on the table. Enough. The sharp crack fractured the air. No one moved. I picked up my portfolio. You have my lawyer's information. Severance and stock vesting should be completed by the end of the day. I expect the board references within the week. I reached the door, then paused. The air behind me buzzed with tension. I looked over my shoulder. Dad? He lifted his head slowly. The Helix Project needs an honest conversation, not a miracle, not a lie. If you keep pretending Brianna's promises are reality, you'll lose everything. His face crumpled anger. Denial, grief, all fighting for space. And for what it's worth, I added softly, I didn't destroy this company. I just stopped protecting it. I turned to leave. As the door clicked shut behind me, I caught Brianna's reflection in the glass, wide-eyed breath held watching the only person who ever cleaned up her messes walk away for good. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside the mirrored walls, reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized, calm, collected, unbroken. As the doors closed, a cold, steady smile found its way onto my lips. They thought suspending me was the end. They had no idea it was the beginning. I didn't look back as I walked out of Hayes Tech, but the moment I stepped into the parking garage, the weight in my chest shifted. Not lighter, not heavier, just different. Like a door had shut behind me, sealing a version of my life I could finally stop trying to salvage. I drove home with the radio off, letting the silence settle. By the time I reached my driveway, the clouds had cracked open and sunlight poured through, like the sky itself had decided to breathe again. My phone buzzed. Nonstop emails, missed calls, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I set it face down on the counter and made a cup of coffee instead. Halfway through the mug, an email from Helix Dynamics appeared on my laptop screen. Lauren, thank you for the clarity. We would like to discuss opportunities moving forward. Daniel Reed, CEO Reed Digital Systems via referral. Referral. I knew exactly what that meant. My documentation email hadn't just exposed Brianna. It had revealed that I was the only adult in the room. That night, I sat on my couch laptop, open city lights, flickering outside my window. I reread my mother's letter, the one she wrote for me in case the truth became too heavy to hold alone. Her words steadied something deep inside. You do not have to shrink to make others comfortable. You do not have to carry burdens they created. And leaving is not betrayal. Sometimes it is survival. I closed the laptop. I knew what I had to do next. Not to destroy Hayes Tech, not to expose Brianna publicly, not to get revenge in the way people expect. My revenge was simpler, sharper, colder. I was going to take my talent, my integrity, my leadership, everything they took for granted, and give it to someone who actually valued it. And the moment I stepped into a new company, built new products, created new systems with people who respected the truth. The contrast alone would devastate them more than any lawsuit ever could. They thought they had clipped my wings. But all they did was open the cage, and they had no idea what I was going to build next. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Stories like mine don't end with a single walkout or a slammed boardroom door. They unfold, they evolve, and sometimes they rise from the very places that tried to break us. Tell me in the comments if you've lived through favoritism, betrayal, or being the one person who kept everything running while someone else got the credit. I read every message, and stay close. This story isn't over.